Good evening and welcome to this very cold Tuesday, February 6, 2018 meeting of the Raymore Planning and Zoning Commission. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Let me remind commissioners, please make sure your microphone is lighted and speak into the mic for the record. And we'll call roll. Commissioner Armstrong.
Here.
Commissioner Bowie. Commissioner Crane.
Present.
Commissioner Fizer.
Present.
Commissioner Meiske.
Present.
Commissioner Urquia. Mayor Turnbow.
Present.
And Commissioner Faulkner is present. We do have a quorum. No items this evening under personal appearances, and so we will move to consent agenda. We have two items this evening under consent: acceptance of minutes from our December 19th, 2017 meeting, and case 18001, Edgewater at Creekmore, 6th final plat. And unless anyone on the commission has an issue with either of those, I would entertain a motion as you wish, either to approve the consent agenda as presented or to approve those individual items.
I'd move to accept the consent agenda, including items A, acceptance of minutes from the December 19, 2017 meeting, and item B, case number 18001, Edgewater at Creekmore, 6th and final plat.
Thank you, Mayor Turnbow. Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
And thank you, Commissioner Meiske. There is no discussion on consent agenda, so all those in favor of the motion to approve both items, please raise a hand. 6. Okay, I'm counting 6. That sounds about right. 6 in favor, none opposed, no abstentions. And we have nothing this evening under old business, so that will move us right along to new business, a discussion of the sign code. And Mr. Carteret, Mr. Gress, take it away, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll start the discussion, then have City Attorney Jonathan Zur follow up. Okay. Initially, staff intended on this topic to have much more discussion than probably what we will have this evening. For a few of the members that have been here for a few years, you know, this topic's come up many times. Most recently, it came up at a discussion back in 2016 when staff, myself, and Mr. Zur made a presentation to our city council, first at a work session, then we followed up in May of 2016 with the commission. We were talking about the need for looking at our sign code to address at the time it was a recent Supreme Court case that came out of Arizona. It was a case between individual by the name of, the town of Gilbert and a church that was located within the town of Gilbert, Arizona. It was a case regarding the language contained within the town of Gilbert's sign code. And specifically, it was dealing with regulations that we felt could impact our community, that we wanted to take a look at that court decision to see how that decision would impact what we have written in our sign code to make sure we were compliant with what the court decided. Mr. Zur can briefly go over that court case. The specific of the case was that the court felt that the town of Gilbert in their sign code, they imposed what they referred to as content-based regulations that violated some First Amendment provisions. And specifically, that the court was concerned that the sign regulations were content-based, meaning you almost had to look at the sign and read the sign to determine what part of the sign code applied, and they felt, and there was some advantage given to commercial speech over non-commercial speech in the town of Gilbert. They over-regulated signage that a church was utilizing for a special event. In simple terms, the town was allowing a business to put a temporary sign out for a period of time. But for the church to put the sign out, it was much more restricted time period, and it was based upon the content of the sign. And so the town's sign code really was determined to be content-based, and that was the whole focus of the court case, which made, at the time, my comments were, and I think it still remains valid, that all communities across the country needed to look at their regulations, make sure you're treating speech equally, commercial and non-commercial speech. Fortunately, even prior to this court case, in one of our amendments that we had gone through prior to 2016, you'll recall, we spent a lot of time on sign code, specifically Mr. Zur, in looking at a case out of the state of Missouri in the town of Gladstone. Provided a lot of good direction for us when we drafted our regulations. And since 2016, we've really looked closely at what other cities have done, and looked closely back to our code. And it was kind of my determination and discussions with Mr. Gress and Mr. Zur that our code really is in line with that court case. The way we treat commercial and non-commercial speech in our sign code it's fair, we believe, and don't believe that it actually needs to be amended at this time. When we regulate temporary signs in Raymore, we allow the same time period for commercial and non-commercial speech. We define what a qualifying event is. We define when the signs can go up and when the signs can come down, and that specific time period, and consistently based upon, or not based upon what the content of the sign is. So, closer look at that. At this time, we had thought we would come to you with some proposals to amend. I know, Mr. Chairman, you were concerned about amending the code last time in 2016. I know, Commissioner Craig, you went through this process too many times, where we took special care several years ago to draft the language in our code. And just speaking for myself, I think where we're at, the code does not need to be amended based upon this Supreme Court decision, that we're still in line with what that decision held at that time, and I don't think anything else has changed since then. We can get into more specifics. I don't know that it's necessary. I do want to have Mr. Zur just give his thoughts on the matter regarding the court case and where we're at in our code, and any comments he may have in general, and then we'll just open it up if you have questions.
Right. Sounds good. Thank you, Mr. Cataret. Mr. Zur.
No problem. I will quote very shortly with regard to this. Mr. Cataret did an excellent job of doing an overview. A lot of the issue that we've seen is going to be the distinction between commercial messages versus political messages and other non-political personal messages. In our particular case, we are clear within the terms of our sign code, and in fact we've got a very nice chart outlining when those signs are allowed to go up, when they're allowed to be up, signs with a commercial message versus a non-commercial message, and all of it is very clearly outlined in 435.050. I would also note that with regard to elections in particular, the duration of those will allow for 30 days prior to an election and up to, I believe, 5 days after upon the election of the candidate to office or thereafter. So basically it ends the opportunity for those political signs to be up, and those have been found to be reasonable under the terms of the case law. More importantly, what I would say is I have not seen anything come out from the courts in either Missouri Supreme Court or otherwise which will alter or affect the Grandview case justifying us to make alterations on our side. So if there was a new, exciting Grandview case available, we'd be reporting information this evening that may impact upon it, but we have not yet seen that. I have not seen anything come over from Missouri Municipal Lawyers Association or otherwise regarding that. So I am comfortable with the notion of having discussion if you all want to talk about exciting things like inflatable signs again or otherwise, but as far as mandating some type of requirement to our sign code, I don't see a justification. I think Mr. Cataret and I are both on the page with that.
Mr. Gress, I take it you concur? Okay, just checking. You had been quiet. So let's open the floor for discussion by the commission. I know several of us do remember 2016 and probably from several different perspectives. So I'm just going to put you on the spot. Commissioner Meiske?
No, I think it's a good plan that we have.
No problems?
No,
Okay. All right.
I actually went in the book and looked at it, so.
That's a very good thing. We should do that every now and then, shouldn't we? Commissioner Armstrong, any comments or questions for staff and city attorney?
None from me.
All right. Vice Chair Pfizer?
I do have a question.
Yeah, Mike.
When there's like a lighted sign and half of the letters are not lit up anymore, is there some sort of like time limit that people have to make those look or fix those so it's not, bad looking?
There would be. We specifically added some language to address that issue where we had some signs that were illuminated. There's no requirement to illuminate a sign, but if it is illuminated, it needs to be working
Right.
in its entirety. If we are aware of it, our code enforcement officer will talk to the business, tell them that the sign needs to be either not illuminated, or if you are, you need to get all the letters of the sign to be illuminated. Typically, something of that nature would give them 30 days. We would work with them. We would establish a specific time frame, but we always work with the business. It hasn't come up for some time, but occasionally there'll be a situation where we have to contact the business and ask them to repair the sign. Usually have good compliance. I could only think of one instance where they actually just stopped illuminating the sign because they just couldn't get it working. But otherwise, most businesses will want the sign to be
I would
fixed, so
think they would. We just didn't know if there was
generally 30 days.
okay.
Yeah.
Did we miss the old flickering neons? Yeah, maybe not.
No.
Commissioner Crane?
I'm just waiting for the sunset of pole signs.
Well, I always take great pride. That has been a long, very carefully orchestrated endeavor, and I know we've had one or two challenges to sign code, not necessarily poles, but size and location, and I think Raymore looks pretty darn good. And I certainly thank City Council for their support. Mayor Turnbow, comments, questions about signs?
Well, sir, as a segue to your comment just now, I was going to ask Jim, what are the most common requests for signs that you all have to say no to?
It would, dealing specifically with temporary signs for businesses, they don't necessarily like having to come in and get a permit each time. What they're allowed to do, a business is allowed in a calendar year to put up a temporary sign, in essence, 4 times for 30-day time periods. Now, they can put them up and take them down each day, and some businesses do that, but generally, once they issue a permit, they're allowed 30 days to have that sign up. They have to take the sign down for at least 10 days before they can put another sign up. But they're only allowed to do that 4 times a year, and so we track that on a calendar year. I think their concern is having to get a permit. Permits are $15 each time they come in and get one. I think we really use the permit as a tracking mechanism for when the sign is allowed to be in and when it has to be removed. But businesses typically want to have the temporary signage up longer than the 30-day time period. The second issue, the second comment that we get from businesses are those that don't have frontage on 58 Highway. So they'll be off the highway like Remington, the businesses behind McDonald's and Subway. They will want a sign out on 58 Highway to direct traffic to them, and that's not allowed. You have to have frontage on 58 for your business to have a sign out there. So we get that question from a few businesses that don't have visibility, but that's generally the 2 areas that we get the most question.
Okay. I was, with some of the new development that we've had, you'll see the promotional banners go up as they initially open. And I assume that falls under the regulations that you initially spoke of, 4 times per year, no more than 30 days at a time with a permit, that type of thing.
That's correct. We always work with the businesses, especially at a grand opening event. So when a business first opens, we will be a little bit more lenient on enforcement, just to allow them to get familiar with what the code requirement is, meaning that many businesses won't check with us ahead of time. They'll just put signs up, and then we'll have to go talk with them, and we try to work with them for that initial opening period, but after that, we were very structured about the times that they're allowed to have the signs. As far as length of time and how often. But we have a number of businesses that put them up, take them down, put them up, take them down, almost on a nightly basis. Mr. Gress and I and our code enforcement officer we've had a lot of discussion recently about trying to address those questions, how to be business friendly, but also, respect the code and try to keep the appearance of the community, clean and neat, somewhat orderly, and not have a proliferation of temporary signs. So we keep struggling with that in the context of the code. We can't make commercial speech have provisions where they're allowed to have commercial signs longer than non-commercial. So it's that constant balance of trying to do what's best for our businesses, but also maintain and respect what the code requirements are and what's reasonable. So we'll continue to think through that and try to work with Mr. Tapp on because he hears, he talks to the businesses a lot as economic development director, and try to make sure we're addressing their needs.
Another follow-up. Since we're going into campaign season here for the April election, with regard to political signs, did the Supreme Court decision have any effect on how our regulated measures are with regard to time, distance, size, and so forth? Was there any changes in there? I don't know if once filing deadline closes, can they stick a sign out real quick? Because I think our code actually gives them 30 days, correct? Is the limitation? So I'm just kind of curious if that decision made any changes to that.
No, it's not going to have impacted that one as far as the outcome. We are still within a reasonable time frame for when political signs can be up. Obviously, the political signs on public property are still an issue. From an individual property owner, homeowner's standpoint, you can put them up 30 days prior to the election of candidates or decision of a ballot question, and termination upon the election of a candidate to office, resolution of a ballot question, or defeat of a candidate in a primary or general election as applicable. So you're still within that 30-day time frame. Now, obviously, if there's a primary that goes into it, it can be up 30 days before the primary, and it can continue to stay up after the primary for any final runoff, final election for it. So you would get more than just your 30 days out of that run.
Okay. Thank you. That's all I have, sir.
No, that's fine.
Unless you had
Thank
something
you.
else, Jim?
Yeah, if I can, just to remind everybody, because election season will be coming up here, local election for April, as Mr. Zur indicated, 30 days before the election is when the signs can first appear. Our code allows a property owner, first of all, the signs have to be on private property. If they're placed in the right-of-way, we will remove them. If on private property, a property owner is able to have, for each candidate, one sign. Now, they can have, if there's multiple elections, especially when you get to state or national elections, they may have multiple signs out for multiple candidates and offices, which is fine, but one per candidate per street frontage. So we don't limit the number of signs an individual can have on their property. We just limit it per candidate or ballot issue or other issues. So if you can have, so when you see multiple signs on private property, that actually is okay under code. When you get to the commercial properties, like Willowwood is a good example, because Willowwood has a proliferation of signs. What's difficult about Willowwood is each tenant space actually, we don't do it by property owner, so it's hard for us to know who has authorized signs. We don't call up property owners and try to find out if so-and-so has permission to be place a sign. All we're looking at is it on private property? If it is, we leave it alone, and how many signs per candidate may be there. On commercial property, it gets very difficult on multi-tenant properties. On an individual commercial property, then it's a little bit easier to control or regulate, but we don't enforce the odor authorization part of the code. I know that question comes up a lot. And we don't pull signs from private property. We only pull them if they're on public property. If it's on private property, we'll either call the candidate or the property owner if we have an issue and get it addressed. That's pretty rare when that happens. It's more common to have them just placed in the right-of-way, and again, that's not allowed for any signs. So, those we will pull.
Okay. Any further discussion? Having heard you all say, we think we're good, is commission comfortable? We think we're good on sign code for now? Okay. And feel free at any time in the future, if signs become a concern to you or anything else, bring it up. We can discuss it, direct staff, and go further from that. But for now, let's move on. We'll close new business and go on to city council report. Mr. Zur, I believe.
Thank you, Chairman Faulkner. It's a pleasure to be able to provide the City Council report for this evening. Tonight I'll be reporting with regard to two separate City Council meetings. The first one will be January 8th. The second will be January 22nd, but I will take care of both of those in a single particular comment. There's only one item on the January 22nd agenda that would have a concern or issue with regard to the Planning and Zoning Commission, so I will make sure and address that appropriately. The first item that we'd have from the January 8th, 2018 City Council meeting was a rezoning of Cumberland Plaza lots 1 through 4. This came before the Planning and Zoning Commission on November 21st, 2017, and was approved unanimously 6-0 by the members present that evening. It had its first reading on December 11th, 2017, received a approving vote of 7-0, and was finally approved and read for a second time on January 8th. That motion was again read and approved. This alters the zoning on the Cumberland Plaza lots from C1 neighborhood commercial to a C2 general commercial. Next item on the agenda of interest would be the rezoning of part of the Good Ranch Tract 1. Again, this is an item that came before the Planning and Zoning Commission on November 21st, 2017. Parcel property located at northwest corner of Dean Avenue and North Cass Parkway. Rezoned the property from agricultural to a regional commercial. That was also read for a second time and approved by the City Council on January 8, 2018. On a tangentially related matter, and perhaps more personally, the City Council awarded the City Attorney's contract again to our firm, so I will be able to continue to come and enjoy the presence of my Planning and Zoning Commission members here this evening and again in the future. There was an amendment to the Property Maintenance Code, which may be of some issue for you all. The City Council approved the original reading of this on December 11th, 2017, amending the Property Maintenance Code to address hoarding issues within the city. This has been an item that has kind of been spearheaded by the Community Development Department, and obviously I would invite them to be able to chime in if they've got additional input. But it is a very helpful ordinance that you will see. It is not an effort to be punishing in its implementation. It is an effort to try and identify properties and property owners that may need assistance with regard to hoarding tendencies, and allows for the city to bring in potentially mental health individuals to assist in that process. So very well crafted, and one that they've drawn from a couple of different locations, though they are not prevalent around the state of Missouri at this particular time. So I would argue that we are somewhat cutting edge, and grateful for our community development staff for taking it on in that manner rather than utilizing it solely from an enforcement perspective. The next item that's of interest would be two new business items. First readings occurred January 8th. The first one was the 26th Amendment to the Unified Development Code. This was before the Planning and Zoning Commission again on November 21st, related to chickens and solar energy. The initial reading was read and approved, and council approved it by a vote of 7-0, and it was second read and approved on the January 22nd, 2018 City Council meeting. So there has been a overview of solar energy implementation in the city of Raymore, and also allowance for similar fowl, I think is the exact terminology. 27th Amendment to the Unified Development Code had a first reading. At the conclusion of the first reading, the matter was tabled for a work session discussion. You all might recall this as being the accessory dwelling units, both detached and attached. Last night, the City Council had the opportunity to review this in a work session. Staff came forward, and Mr. Gress and Mr. Catterat made good presentations with regard to the options available with attached and detached accessory dwelling units. This is allowance for apartments to be incorporated into basements with separate entrances and so on. Work session concluded with additional instruction, I think, from the City Council for staff to go back and look at some of the definitional provisions, and I think that that will be able to then move forward with an accessory dwelling unit proposal. I don't believe that will come back before the Planning
Yes,
Commission.
it will.
Come back before so it will come back before the Planning and Zoning Commission. You'll get the opportunity to see that proposed change. That is all I have with regard to the City Council report, and obviously I would invite the Mayor as well as Mr. Caderet and Mr. Gress to chime in with any additional information that they think would be appropriate based upon that report.
All right, let's move on to staff report.
Thank you, sir. Several items. The first is looking at our calendar. I did request from the chairman to, on behalf of City Council, to cancel our February 20th meeting. Again, with the holiday on the 19th, President's Day on the 19th, City Council won't have a work session, but they have a work session. They have a need for a work session, so the request has been made for the Planning Commission to cancel the second meeting in February, and we don't have any applications scheduled, so we would like to cancel that meeting, so no P and Z on February 20th.
I'm sure the commission is completely disappointed by that. Okay,
But we will have a meeting on March 6th, so there's the good news.
Thank you.
So have it in your calendar. At that meeting, we will be bringing back the UDC amendments. For those of you that perhaps kept close eye on that, when it came to the commission, it was actually only the 26th Amendment. All three items were on the same amendment. But to anticipating the need to take the accessory dwelling units to work session, we separated them out into two amendments. So the amendment to the animals on residential lots and the solar energy didn't get bogged down with accessory dwelling units. We broke them out. We went back to the council, as Mr. Zur indicated last evening, for discussion with the intent of bringing it back as a separate item in front of the Planning Commission again. So we'll do that formal public hearing, and Mr. Gress will make that presentation about the amendment just to accessory dwelling units. A lot of work's gone into that since you first saw it, and we want to pay close attention to what we're proposing and have the commission focus on just that item, where we believed when it came through the first time there was much more discussion about the animals than the accessory dwelling units. Both important topics, but let's separate them out. So that'll come forward on the 6th. We may also look at doing, we'll have new commission members. You know, we have Mr. Akia, who's fairly new. We'll have a replacement for Mr. Anderson that will be coming on board. So we thought maybe that meeting would be good for training session as well on the 6th. So,
yeah.
and I'll let the mayor speak on the appointment of an individual to replace Mr. Anderson. Mr. Anderson did resign from the commission. He stepped down. He took a position out of state, an employment position out of state. So his seat became vacant for a Ward 3 representative, and I believe the Ward 3 council representatives have forwarded a name on to the mayor for appointment. So I'll let the mayor speak to that. So we will have that meeting on March 6th, next time we get together. Second item to talk about is a reminder on the planning conference this year. We would like to see a planning commission member attend. This conference is in New Orleans. It is from Saturday, April 21st to Tuesday, April 24th. I know Mr. Gress and myself are both planning to attend at this time, but again, the city does budget for a commission member to go, so all the expenses are paid by the city for attendance at that, and we'll make those arrangements if we have a commission member that is interested. I know a number of you have gone to previous conferences, so Mr. Chairman, I'll go ahead and put that out with a couple of absences and new members. I'll put that out as a reminder to everybody to let me know if they have an interest to attend.
We're still not bumping a deadline.
We're not yet.
Not yet.
It gets a little bit more precarious to get a hotel room if we wait too long.
Okay.
Right now, I think we're okay.
Okay. Thank you.
I think I've covered the other items that I have written down. So at this time, if I can, I'll just call Mr. Rokos, if that's okay, just for any updates that Public Works may have for your information.
Yes, please.
Well, as far as things going on for the construction side, this is the season for us bidding jobs. And this week, we are opening 2 bids on Thursday, one for the Silver Lake culvert and one for Johnson Drive between Dean and Darby will be opened up this week. Hopefully, its plan is next month to open a bid out to 155th Street Bridge and start work on that following the bid opening and approval. And those are the things that we have working on right now.
You've been out shoveling snow?
Not today.
Okay. That was a good thing, yes. All right, thank you, Mr. Rokas. Staff? Okay.
I think that's all we have, sir.
All right, thank you. Seeing no public, don't know that there's any reason, but I'll open the floor for public comment. And seeing none, let's move on to commission member comment. Who do I want to start with this evening? Vice Chair Pfizer.
Well, I'm happy that Mr. Zur will be continuing with us. I know we keep him entertained, or we try to.
Challenge.
And that's it.
Yeah, thank you. Commissioner Armstrong.
No comment.
Secretary Crane.
Well, I was sorry to hear of our loss of Leo. I mean, I've known Leo a long time. He's been a big contributor to our town, and I wish him all the best in his new adventure down in Houston.
Yep, sounds good. Thank you. Commissioner Meiske.
No comment.
Y'all are quiet over there on my right. Let's see. Well, we're down to Mayor Turnbow.
Well, I want to echo Commissioner Crane's comments about Mr. Anderson. I always enjoyed hearing his conversation about items, and then he was always a good leader for moving us in a direction one way or another with motions, and his sage advice and tenure with the group's going to be missed. Follow on to that, Ward 3 applications were submitted, we reviewed, and the 2 councilmen from Ward 3 and myself kind of came to agreement on a young man by the name of Matt Wiggins. Matt served on the Charter Commission. I did a fantastic job there with his thorough and philosophical comments about the charter, what its intentions were. I really enjoyed hearing the things that he had to say that were very meaningful, and I felt like when he said that he'd like to serve on this commission, that he would be a great addition to this group. So he will be proposed at the next council meeting for approval next Monday night, and hopefully he'll be seated here at our next meeting in March. And then, gosh, I had another comment here. Oh, we'd already talked about the accessory dwelling units brought up by staff and Mr. Zur. You know, from our perspective, once Mr. Feuerborn and I and Mr. Caderet were kind of reviewing how that whole process went through with the P&Z, we knew that it was going to be difficult as a separated issue with the council to go through with that, besides the fact that there were only 6 present at the time. I'd really like a full Planning and Zoning Commission group to be here to really give insight to that particular process. There were some great comments and suggestions about verbiage changes, as Jim mentioned, to definitions were brought up at the work session last night. Very meaningful, I thought, and so they will come back to us with a document that I feel like you will all be pleased with, and then of course, if any of us have his input at that time, I would appreciate that, because it is an important issue when you start talking about adding additions to homes for additional family personnel, or even converting a downstairs area to an apartment dwelling, a detached, a separate facility, how it's addressed, how are they going to know to respond to an emergency to that particular address. I mean, these are things that were brought up last night I felt like staff got great direction on it. I know they're working diligently on it to add to the definition of that so we understand it better. And so I'm looking forward to that product coming forward to the planning and zoning. And that's all I have tonight, sir. Thank you.
That was good, though. Thank you. I have very little to say, but as always, thank you to staff, all four of you this evening, and I know this takes another chunk out of your lives, but we appreciate the support and keeping us tied in, especially when we're in a mode like we are now with missing roughly every other meeting. It's good to have some continuity, and so we certainly do appreciate the support. Unless anyone else has anything to add, my goodness, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Who seconded? He got the first. I heard you, Mr. Mayor, so we'll have to let Commissioner Crane speak more loudly next time. So, motion to adjourn, I'm going to call it by Commissioner Meiske, second by Mayor Turnbow. All those in favor, raise a hand, please. And again, I've got 6 in favor, none opposed, no abstentions. Small group tonight, but that's a good.